people that I'm familiar with, God bless you. Praise the Lord. Since I was here, we've made an amazing trip to India and Bangladesh. And Kath, my wife, came with me. I used to go to India quite frequently in the 80s. And the dear people who sort of originally invited me was a brother called P.S. Rajamoni. Said to me, you ought to come back to India again. I said, well, I'd like to come. It's about almost 30 years since I was there. And he said, you must come to see what God has done over the period of time since we conducted those prayer and Bible camps in South India, when we prayed that God would change the whole face of India and start to bring people in who had money and all sorts of things. We prayed to do the work of God in India, because they had been really relying on outside countries and so on to do the work. And I wasn't happy with that, and we sort of suggested that we ought to pray earnestly about that. And he said, come and see what God has done. And so that was the primary purpose. And I said, do you think it would be safe for my wife to come as well? Because back in the 80s, I didn't feel too much safety about her going there because of the problems that you face. And he said, oh yes, that will be fine. So we went, and it really was amazing. I don't propose to talk to you about that. We mentioned something at the conference, and if you want to catch up on what we said there about it, then you can get the tapes. All the tapes are available. And we will be publishing some stuff in our Contending Earnestly about what happened there. But right at the end, we went to Bangladesh, which went through a war. Pakistan tried to sort of control Bangladesh, and India came in on the Bangladesh side, and eventually it became a separate country. Very close to India, of course, very similar in many ways. And while we were there, a dear brother that we have known for many years, a reputable man who is worthy of support, a man called David and his wife Alice Campbell. Now David is English, Alice is Bangladeshi, Bengali, and she is a trained nurse, and for many years they had a desire to go to Bangladesh and establish a work for God there. And the amazing thing was that right at the end of our time in India, and when we went over to Bangladesh, we had just 4 days, they put on a conference, and they called it the first CWM conference in Bangladesh, the first Christian Witness Ministries conference. About 90 people there. And it was really very, very thrilling to see what David and Alice are doing. They're getting out on the streets and witnessing. For example, in that conference, there were 3 people from Iraq, I think they were, who had come across to play soccer. And David had met them and witnessed to them. And I am not sure if they were Christians before or not, but they were at the conference. And he's witnessed and seen Muslim people and Hindus and all sorts of people already saved. He hasn't been there long. Now, it's a very, very worthy cause, and we're getting behind it in CWMF in Brisbane, and it's something that we would commend to you to pray about. Just recently, we sent them a donation, and it just arrived on time. They said to us, it's been amazing that money has come through. It was substantial, about $2,000 or something, which goes a fair way in that sort of currency. And they were so thrilled. So I commend that to you. And we do thank you so very much for your support in the work of the gospel. The church here were largely responsible for helping us to get out the mailing of CETF, Contending Earnestly for the Faith, to New Zealand over many, many years. Now we print that in New Zealand, and it's mailed there, and so on. But I'd like to formally thank you for your help in that area. Now, what I want to do this morning is a bit different. We don't have a lot of time. We need to get away fairly soon after the meeting this morning, because the meeting in Frankston is at 3 o'clock, and we need to get there. And Pastor Werner and Ella very kindly taking me over there. But I want to do something different. We've been looking at the whole concept at Frankston of a Bible-guided church, or a Bible-led church, a biblically based church. How do we build a biblically based church? And Pastor Morgan has been giving some brilliant talks out of Peter, and I've been trying to help in talking about the nature of the church, the foundation of the church, and the function of the church. I've given 2 talks so far. But right at the end, I want to come in with more of a devotional sort of appeal. You see, it's so easy for us to rationalize everything that's wrong and not have a relationship ourselves. We need to have a relationship with the Lord. And so I want to talk more about intimacy and fellowship with the Lord. And in doing so, I'm looking at a rather unusual book. It's the Song of Songs, which is often called the Song of Solomon. Wrongly so called, in my opinion. I don't think it was written by Solomon. And if you want to know why I don't think it was written by Solomon, well, come this afternoon. We'll have a look at that then. But it's more about Solomon. And what I want to do is just give a bit of an overview and a sort of an outline. Some years ago, when I was about 40, that's a few years back now, our own son is having his 40th birthday. He was at 40th birthday was yesterday. That's our second son, not our oldest son. So I better not, I'm getting on a bit. And we're actually having a celebration in Healesville for him. He's a Presbyterian minister, of all things. And he's pastoring a church, very happy in what he's doing, in Aubrey. But he's coming down to Healesville, where we'll celebrate. So when I was about 40, I looked at the Song of Solomon for about the first time. I mean, I'd read it, but I'd never got very deeply into it and couldn't make head nor tail of it in many ways. In Judaism, they say that you shouldn't read it until you're 30. Well, I was a bit of a late starter, so 40 was okay. I saw something different about it. Now, I'm not saying I got specific revelation. I read a story about a story behind the story, which seemed to open up the whole thing to me. And I preached a whole series. I preached another series in Brisbane some years ago, and I'm going through it again now. And eventually I'd like to actually write a book on the Song of Songs. Whether I'll ever get round to it, I don't know. But let me just take a couple of verses here. It starts off, it says, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. About Solomon, concerning Solomon. That's the implication. Really, if you look at those words as they are used elsewhere in the Bible, and the Song of Songs suggests that it is the superlative song. One Jewish writer said that the Bible is the Holy of Holies, is the holy place, but the Song of Songs is the Holy of Holies. And he says that Israel only really fully entered into her completeness when this song was given. Now, many see it as a love song of human relationships, man and woman relationship, and of course there is that message there. And it's a very important relationship. God made us as He made us, and He made us male and female. We're getting our genders mixed very much today. I quoted Michael Kirby, who said recently, that's the former chief judge of the High Court, or one of the judges of the High Court in resigned or retired from that position now. Everybody knows he's homosexual. And he said that eventually the church will have to apologize to the gay community for what they've taught. And basically he said, you need to look at it. He said, one thing I've learned as a judge is to look at things in context. And he said, Christians have not looked at the teaching in the Bible about homosexuality and all that in context. We're going to address that issue in the next Contending Earnestly and show that really, I mean, the man is we're living in amazing times. As it was in the days of Noah, every thought, evil thought of man, every thought of man is evil continually. That's the way it's going. That's all. We're almost there. And the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, the days of Lot, those are the two parallels that Jesus spoke about. And again, it's an indication that we're very, very close to the end. So in saying this about the Song of Songs, I'm not disparaging the idea of it being a poem of a love song. And it is from a divine perspective. Now, but in saying that, I'd like to also say this. Some modern writers have tried to get ideas out of there, and they have made explicit what the Bible has made implicit. Now, we don't have any authority to do that. If it's implicit in the Scriptures, leave it that way. And it does talk about relationship, but people like Arnold Fruchtenbaum, who I admire in many areas, in his book on the Song of Songs, he becomes too explicit, in my opinion. And it's nauseating. Some churches have gone down this track where they go to the point of putting a four-poster bed on the platform, and a man and a woman there, and they preach on the Song of Songs. That is terrible. But if you just see it as a love song and a love poem, then you really miss everything. And this is the thrust of what I feel that the Lord quickened to me many years ago, and I began to see something here. Verse 2 says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth." And now here's the clue. And notice it very often as you go through the book. I can't go through it in detail, and my notes are not adequate to identify everything, and my memory is not as good as it used to be. So you search it out. But this is the clue that comes through very, very often in the book. There's a change of subject. And in this verse, you see the change of subject. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And then the Shunammite directs something away and says, for your love is greater than wine. Last verse of the Song of Songs. We're just doing a bit of an overview here. Make haste, my beloved, and be thou like to a roe or to a young hart upon the mountains of spices. Everybody who's been worth his salt in theology has seen in the Song of Songs a comparison of the church and Christ, or in the Jewish context, Israel and the husband, Jehovah. I say everybody. So that's not something new. But what I want to present is again not something new. It was presented in the late 1800s initially. But it is a different view. Because most people tend to see Solomon as being the representative of Christ, the bridegroom. Now, personally, I can't accept that for many reasons, not least of the fact that he was a philanderer, and although God made him wise and gave him wisdom as a result of his asking, he he traded it and became very, very unwise. And he married many women. And the Bible says they turned his heart. So for me, Solomon cannot possibly be the representative of Christ. This is why I never tackled the thing for a long time. And then I came across this story, which I'll share with you. But just, you may not accept what I have to say. Some people have difficulty with it. That's fine. I'm not saying it has to be accepted. I believe it's an interpretation. For me, it is the only interpretation which gives substance to the whole thing and gives a basis for seeing everything sort of linked in. And I'll just share it with you. Obviously, there's many, many messages out of this book, and I can't deal with it all this morning. But you have the same Holy Spirit to direct you as we do. And so with this thought in mind, just see where you go with it. C.H. Spurgeon was one of the ones who saw great truth in the Song of Songs, and what his particular view was. Probably he saw Solomon and the Shulamite, I don't know. But this is what he says in one of his articles, where it's headed, "Come, my beloved." And remember this, the thrust that I'm trying to get across is the need for intimacy with Christ. We need to develop an intimacy with Christ. Our church is going through a whole sort of situation at the moment where there's a cry on the hearts of the people for God. My goal is God himself. Not joy or peace or blessing, but himself. My God. 'Tis his to lead me there, not mine, but his. At any price, dear Lord. At any cost. What we've done in Christianity and in the gospel is we have made the trimmings the main thing. You know, the blessings. And sadly, here in Australia and in most of the Western world, everything is related to me. You know, even the songs now, particularly the songs that are coming out of Hillsong, they're all me-related. Me. I sat on the executive, as you know, for a number of years at Assemblies of God, and almost one of the last meetings that I was on. And we were talking about the theme for the conference. And actually we selected, it wasn't the last one, it was about halfway through my term, I think. We selected ultimately Jesus as the theme. But one of the men, Alan Davis, who you probably know, is down here in Dandenong, he said, well, okay, he said, but really, if we're going to meet the people, we've got to somehow get self in there. And it was all to do with psychology. He's a psychologist. Alan Davis is a psychologist. He's trained in psychology. And he said, we've got to get, and that's where it's gone, brothers and sisters. That's where it's gone. We don't want to get me in there. We've got to get Christ in there. Thank God we as an executive at that point in time said, no, we want Jesus. And we made that our thing, Jesus. Christ. And we have to develop an intimacy with Christ. Now, all of the great preachers of a bygone day realized this. And there's a huge change. There's a rationale that has come into the church, which is contrary to the Bible, which is contrary to God. And as a result, we have all of the problems. Now, it's happening in churches, even churches of our own sort of developing. It happens in our church, where if things are not suitable to people, they don't think in terms of what I can communicate or what I can contribute, but really how it impacts me. And with a church like this, a pioneer church, there will always be problems about leadership of groups and all of that. Same with us. And our big problem is to find somebody who will look after the youth. We've tried all sorts of things, and it hasn't happened. And families, when they have their children, they grow to a certain age, and they're looking for some youth activity. And because we haven't got it within us, they think of going somewhere else. That is a me motivated attitude? Why don't they step up to the line and say, well, we'll do it. We'll do it. What is the church? The church isn't the pastor. The church isn't the elders. The church is the people. And if we're going to do anything for God, then there's got to be a change in many of us, a change of attitude. It's not what I get, but it's what I contribute. And you know, preachers of a bygone day, they saw this. And, you know, C.H. Spurgeon in his day, a 5,000 congregation. I preached in India to a congregation of 40,000. Not all in one go. They have 5 services. 7,500 in each service. Amazing. And I went there thinking, oh, well, they've done what everybody else has done. They're going for the mega church and they're, you know, changing the message. And first thing this man said to me, the pastor, he said, Brother Powell, I want you to know we have not changed the message. And we have not changed our practice. Everything, he said, relates to preaching and prayer. And he stood on the platform where they have an English-speaking congregation, and they were celebrating 25 years of them starting the English-speaking congregation there in that amazing church of 40,000 people. And he was preaching at that. There was about 1,700 people there, I think. And I had a break between my 3 services. I started at 7 o'clock, and then there was another one, and then there was a third one, and there was a break between the second and third. So we slipped up to hear him in this English-speaking one, because he took an opportunity to go there while I was speaking at the others. And it was a Tamil speaking where I was speaking through interpreter. And they were celebrating 25 years of starting this English-speaking church. And you'd have thought, you know, there would have been a bit of eulogy and thanks and praise of what we've achieved. There was no mention of it. He got up there and he said, we have to be dedicated to the cause of Christ. And he started to talk to husbands. He said, husbands, if you've come to this church this morning and you've been quarreling with your wife, he said, that's bad Christianity. You've got to get that sorted out. And he said, there's some people that come to church, and he said, they're listening. And he said, and if they hear something wrong in the music, and a wrong chord, he said, you know, they're concentrating on that. And some people, he said, go through life looking for the missing chord. and this was the nature of it. The nature of it. And I thought, well, what a thing. We haven't changed the message. Nor have we changed the method. We don't have to. There's a great cry to make the message relevant. The message is relevant. God has given us a message which is always relevant. These men of a bygone day recognize this. Come, my beloved, said C.H. Spurgeon, and he put it out as number 2,360 of his sermons, I think. That's the number. And it's headed, A Sermon Intended for Reading on Lord's Day, May the 13th, 1984. So, at the Metropolitan Tabernacle, Newington, on the Lord's Day evening, March the 4th, 1888. Did I say 1984? Okay, yeah, they put it out as intended to be read. So they've tried to systematize it, but not so with C.H. Spurgeon. It was a message that he preached on March the 4th, 1888. Make haste, my beloved, and be thou like to a roe or to a young hart upon the mountains of spices. The Song of Songs describes the love of Jesus Christ to his people, and it ends with an intense desire on the part of the church that the Lord Jesus should come back to her. The last word of the lover to the beloved one is, speed thy return, make haste and come back. Is it not somewhat singular that as the last verse of the book of love has this note in it, so the last verse of the whole book of God, which I may also call the book of love, have the same thought in them. At the 20th verse of the last chapter of Revelation, we read, He which testifieth these things saith, Surely I come quickly. Amen. Even so come Lord Jesus. The song of love and the book of love, and end in almost the same way, with a strong desire for Christ's speedy return. And so they all saw a relationship of the church to Christ, and of that I think there is no doubt. But there is a story behind the story, and this is what I just want to run through with you. The scope of the book is determined by the structure of the book as a whole. The story gradually develops itself, and from the key which is found in the last chapter, chapter 8, verses 5 to 14, which we'll read this afternoon in the session over at Frankston, to which the references have been added, and I've added some references of my own here, connect the threads of the event. And here's the story. There was a family living at Shulam, consisting of a widowed mother, several sons, and one daughter, who maintained themselves by farming and pasturage. The brothers were particularly fond of their sister, and took her under their special care, promising that her prudence and virtue should be greatly rewarded by them. Chapter 8, verses 8 and 9. We have a little sister, and she is not mature. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. And if she is a door, if she is a wall, in other words, if she retains her chastity and her purity, we will recognize that and honor it. But if she's a door, if she's open to everyone, we will enclose her, we will protect her. We will enclose her with boards of cedar. In the course of time, while tending the flock, and according to the custom of the shepherds, resorting at noon beneath a tree for shelter against the meridian sun, this girl met with a graceful shepherd youth, to whom she afterward became espoused. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 7. Tell me, O you whom I love, where you feed your flock, where you make it rest at noon. For why should I be as one who veils herself by the flocks of your companions? My beloved is mine. Song of Solomon 2:16. And I am his. He feeds his flock among the lilies. Lilies was a symbol of purity. You find it coming through in the Song of Solomon in many instances. Where will I find you, Lord? Don't know where to find me? Then just get associated with a group of people who do. Follow the flock. And remember this, I always feed among the lilies. And I lead my flock among the lilies. You never find Christ in anything that's impure. So much impurity. It's invading the church today. Christians, young men, older men, watching pornography. Damnable. Will ultimately destroy you. Feed among the lilies. You won't find Christ in any of that stuff. And ultimately you'll lose your own soul. What a damnable thing it is. Rupert Murdoch, one of the wealthiest men in the world, has made so much of his money from pornography. And do you know that he's a member of the church of Rick Warren? Rick Warren will take anybody in, has money, to support his global ambition. He feeds among the lilies. My beloved has gone to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed his flock in the garden and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies. Song of Solomon 6:2-3. One morning in the spring, this youth invited this girl, the Shulamite, to accompany him into the field. But the brothers, on overhearing the invitation and anxious to protect the reputation of their sister, sent her, in order to prevent their meeting, to take care of the vineyards. Chapter 2, verse 15. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. The damsel, however, consoled her beloved and herself with the assurance that though separated bodily, indissoluble ties subsisted between them, over which her brothers had no control. My beloved is mine, Song of Solomon 2:16, and I am his. He feeds his flock among the lilies. She requested him to meet her in the evening, chapter 3, verse 1, and as he did not come, she feared that some accident had befallen him on the way, went in search of him and found him. Chapter 3, verse 4. By night on my bed, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. You see, it's a poem. And what's happening here, I don't know if any of you remember some of the things that you might have learned in school, in literature, but there's a play, I think it was Hamlet's play, of Shakespeare wrote it, and they have what they call a soliloquy, where actors come onto the sort of the dais, and they start speaking about things that they're imagining, and you have this sort of situation going forward in this Song of Songs. So it's not in sequence; it's a whole set of scenes, and here she sort of is pondering and dreaming. By night on my bed, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. I will rise now, I said, and go about the city and the streets and the squares. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. The watchmen who go about the city found me. I said, have you seen the one I love? Scarcely had I passed by them when I found the one I love. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. Arnold Fruchtenbaum sort of points out, and this is why he actually dismisses this particular view, that he says it wouldn't be in keeping with the whole biblical emphasis if it's talking about a couple that are not married. Well, I think he's probably right in that. But what he hasn't probably taken into account is that marriage then was not like marriage is now. And so, whereas it's always had the aspect of witnesses to marriage. It's not just cohabiting. It's not just a couple coming together, which is what we're having in our day today, where you have partners. And you have a man and a woman, and they just come together. That's not marriage in the biblical sense. In the biblical sense, there had to be witnesses to a public event. Now, initially, it wasn't as we do it with a large company of people, but it was a family arrangement. And so, in my opinion, this could have very well, much of it could have been after they had actually got married, in a quiet, private sort of ceremony. So I feel that Arnold Fruchtenbaum's objection is invalid. I had a friend, a very close friend in England, and I miss him very, very much. He was a lawyer, a very, very reputable lawyer, and I used to lean on him a great deal for advice, and we had a very good relationship. Val Grieve was his name, and he passed away a few years ago. And a good man, an Anglican, evangelical Anglican, and we had great fellowship. And he told me the story of his son. His son was called Stephen, as our eldest son is called Stephen. And he said, Stephen had sort of wandered away a bit from the biblical basis of instruction and so on. And he said he was coming home and he was bringing his girlfriend. And he said, I thought, oh, horrors. He's a typical Englishman. Horrors! What do I do now? No doubt they'll want to sleep together. What will I do? And, he said he was really going through a big trauma. He knew he couldn't allow that under his roof. And yet, what would he do, And lo and behold, Stephen turned up with his supposed girlfriend. And he said, "Dad, please meet my wife." and Powell said, "Oh, what a relief." and couples do that sort of thing. And I think probably you have something like that here. But the Shulamite says, "Please don't awaken love until it's right time." And that's something that, young couples need to learn. There is a time for sexual relationship. Very serious consequences. Some people recover themselves, but it has become a destroying thing of society. The evening now was the only time in which they could enjoy each other's company, as during the day the damsel was occupied in the vineyards. On one occasion, when entering a garden, she accidentally came into the presence of King Solomon. Now, here's King Solomon. He does enter into this thing, who happened to be on a summer visit to that neighborhood. He spotted this girl. Now, he could get anyone, right? In this book, halfway through the book, it says that he's got 80, 80. So whatever age he was at this time, he had 80 wives. And I don't know how many concubines. And lots of hangers-on. And he suddenly spots this girl. And she's ravishing. And he's overwhelmed. He said, "My knees knocked together." And he said, "I want her." Now this is how the story develops. "I want her." And he actually ends up kidnapping her. But she says, "No, you can't have me." My love is devoted to another. I am in love with a hidden shepherd boy. I went out into the garden of nuts to see the verdure, Song of Solomon 6:11-12, of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates bloomed. Before I was even aware, my soul had made me as the chariots of my noble people. Suddenly, the whole thing, Solomon. Struck with the beauty of the damsel, the king conducted her into his royal tent. I better just skip reading some of these verses, but you'll find them there. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verses 2-4. And there, assisted by his court ladies, he endeavored with alluring flatteries and promises to gain her affection, but without effect. Released from the king's presence, the damsel soon sought an interview with her beloved shepherd. The king, however, took her with him to his capital and with great pomp, and in the hope of dazzling her with his splendor. But neither did this prevail, for while even there she told her beloved shepherd, who had followed her to the capital and obtained an interview with her, that she was anxious to quit the gaudy scene for her own home. The shepherd, on hearing this, praised her constancy, and such a manifestation of their mutual attachment took place that several of the court ladies were greatly affected by it. The king, still determined, if possible, to win her affections, he could buy them off. This story actually suggests that. He had all of these. And ultimately, we know from the record that he had 1,000 wives. 700 wives and 300 concubines. This is Solomon. But there's one that he can't get. The Shulamite. The king, still determined, if possible, to win her affections, watched for another favorable opportunity, with flatteries and allurements surpassing all that he had used before, tried to obtain his purpose. He promised to elevate her to the highest rank, to raise her above all his concubines and queens, if she would comply with his wishes. But faithful to her espousal, she refused all his overtures on the plea that her affections were pledged to another. The king, convinced at last that he could not possibly prevail, was obliged to dismiss her, and the shepherdess, in company with her beloved shepherd, returned to her native place. On their way home, they visited the tree under which they had first met, and there renewed their vows of fidelity to each other. On her arrival in safety at her home, her brothers, according to their promise, rewarded her greatly for her virtuous conduct. Now, that is an interpretation. You may not accept it. I think it fits very well and explains everything. But one thing you will certainly agree with me is that here we have an outline of the relationship of the bride of Christ to the bridegroom. Now, as I meditated on this, and I come without a few of those notes down there, I think I can manage without them, I began to see an outline myself. And what I saw was that there is a development in respect of our relationship with Christ. And the first thing that links us to him is that we are enticed or enlisted by an affection for him. We'll develop this a little bit more this afternoon. But Christ brings this into focus when he encounters Peter after the resurrection. And you remember, they've been out fishing. They've caught nothing. That's what happens when we wander away from Christ. We engage in activity here and activity there, but we never find satisfaction. We never catch anything. Because we have walked away from him and his calling upon us, our lives. And then Jesus wonderfully appears. He never leaves us in disillusionment. Always watch for him. Look for him. In your darkest moments, watch for him. Look for him. He'll be there. Have you caught anything? Need you ask? Cast the net on the right side. Who do you think you are? We're fishermen. We know these waters. We know what we're doing. Cast your net on the right side. When they did, every fish in the Sea of Galilee tried to make its way into the net. They were acting under the instruction of the commander-in-chief. What we've got to learn is that we've got to obey and we let him do what he's going to do. As I've been developing this thought for the conference, I was directed in my thinking, although I didn't go into it in any depth, but to Nehemiah. And Nehemiah was called to rebuild Jerusalem. And what he did, he first prayed, and then he put legs to his prayer, which is always what happens. If you pray correctly, you'll act properly. Somebody wrote to me recently and said we need more than prayer. Well, prayer is a good start. And what's more, if you'll pray properly, then you'll act properly. Nehemiah prayed, and then God began to intervene. We think that we've got to do it all. We've got to, rationalize, and we've got to programize, and we've got to do this, and we've got to systematize, and all of this. No, all we've got to do is obey. And then God intervenes. And in 13 chapters of Nehemiah, you have an amazing record of supernatural, sovereign interaction. How God Almighty comes into the scene. Nehemiah has a responsibility. This is where this whole idea, the Calvinistic idea, which if you take it to an extreme is so false. Make God responsible for everything. No. God does things, but we have to do our part. And when we do it, when we obey, then God sovereignly and supernaturally intervenes. Nehemiah goes out and he sees all the rubbish. And he realizes that before he can build, he's got to remove the rubbish. I went out and I saw a lot of rubbish. But my danger, difficulty, and your danger and difficulty is to simply keep on concentrating on the rubbish. Nehemiah didn't remove all the rubbish. He removed what was sufficient for him to start building. We've got to build. We've got to build. And Jesus was going to rebuild with these men who had wandered away. So he selects the main spokesman and he gives him a big interview and he says, "Do you love me, Peter?" That's what it's all about. Do you love me? And Peter says, "I'm affectionately disposed towards you." Jesus didn't sort of berate him or set him down. He just put another question. First question was, "Do you love me more than these?" It was a question of related love. Where on the level of love do you put me? Now, remember, on the level of love that he put us. For God so loved. We've had the verse read to us. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Richard Dawkins says the only thing that God could think of, the best thing that God could think of to save the world, and he says it in a berating manner, was to suffer and to die. He said, "How pathetic." Well, Mr. Dawkins, you're right. And you're wrong. You're right on this, that the best thing that God could think of to save the world was to suffer and to die. But you're wrong when you say, "How pathetic." You're pathetic. Have you not read that even in human relationships, there is the greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. God Almighty loved us so much that he gave his Son to die for us. Thank God. Do you love me, Peter, more than these? I'm affectionately disposed towards you, Lord. So he puts the second question, "Do you love me, Peter?" And again, Peter comes back with the same answer. "I'm fond of you." That's all in the Greek language there. "I'm affectionately disposed towards you." And then the last question. "Peter, are you really affectionately disposed towards me?" "Lord, you know everything." He throws it back on Jesus, which he wasn't prepared to do a while ago. "Lord, you know everything. You know that I'm enlisted by an affection towards you." Good, Peter. Two things. You're honest. And you have put your finger on the most important thing. To be affectionately disposed towards me is the basis on which we can work. So, the big question to us is really, as the bride of Christ, on what basis are we enlisted in our association with him? You know, during my boyhood days and youth, you could sort of enlist to go into the army. Or in my case, probably because I was influenced more by my father at the time, because I'm not sure where I really do stand on this. But I took a conscientious objections position. Now, I'm not sure about that really now. But anyway, that's what I did. But, you know, there were people who were drafted into the army, And there were people who were volunteers into the army. On what basis have you come into the relationship with Christ? You've been drafted in, or are you a volunteer? Are you enlisted in this by an affection towards Jesus Christ? On what basis? This Shulamite had an affection for the hidden shepherd boy, and it controlled everything. It didn't matter what Solomon tried to do. It didn't matter what the whole church system tries to do. And certainly it doesn't matter what the world tries to do. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his lips. Your love is better than wine. Better than anything else that all the world can offer. How much do you love Jesus this morning? My Jesus, I love you. I know you are mine. For you, all the pleasures of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior, art thou, if ever I love thee. My Jesus, 'tis now. So easy, those of us, or hard at times. Those of us who have taken a stand against the Christendom thing, the big church thing. And we've lost friends. We've lost people that we thought a lot of. Some of them won't even talk to us. This is my situation. They won't even talk to me. They call me a divisive man. As Pastor Morgan pointed out yesterday, the divisive man is the man who introduces false doctrine. He's the divisive man. Not the man who stands for the truth. But this is the reality of it. This is what we have to face. I wrote to the chairman of the executive in England when I was making a trip there, and I know him well. And I said, David Petts, I said, dear Brother David, I'm coming to England. Could I meet with the executive? Could I meet with you and the executive? He said, I will present it to the executive. So I thought, well, fine. I got a letter back. He said, no, we will not meet with you. We consider you to be a divisive man. And the Bible says, mark those who cause division. I wrote back, I said, have you read the whole context of that? Romans chapter 16, it says, mark those who cause division among you, contrary to the gospel, to the doctrine which you have learned. I said, where have I caused division contrary to the doctrine? He never answered. But that's the situation. Let them kiss me with the kisses of their lips. Your love is better than wine. Hallelujah. Where do you stand this morning? You're going to stand for truth, come what may, come what will? Are you a part of the bride, or are you a part of that great harlot system? No, I tell you, there's so many groups that don't realize they're a part of it, and yet they're courting the favor of the harlot church on every hand. But in the midst of it all, there is a bride. Christ is bringing a bride to himself. And that bride has to be joined to him, enlisted by an emotional attachment. That's how it starts. Don't let anything quench that. Hallelujah. That will develop into real love. You can start with that. You can work with that. You may say, Lord, I don't have it. I don't have that agape love. That's what Peter said. I really don't have it. But I am affectionately disposed towards you. That's good. That's a starting point. I can do something with that. And he takes Peter up. And what does he do with Peter? He turns him into one of the greatest champions of the gospel age. Uses him to open the door to the Gentile world. Entered into the church, 3,000 on the day of Pentecost. Marvelous. Not Peter, Christ. The bride is here. The bridegroom is up there. And we love him. Hallelujah. Lord, we pray that you will help us. We are very, very human, and Lord, we forget and we fail and we do all sorts of things. But we thank you that you are sovereign. And we thank you that this morning we can take that position that, yes, Lord, maybe some of us, being on the way for some years, can really now say that we do love you with all our hearts. Others might be struggling and saying, well, yes, I do have an affection for this and for you and for the things of truth. Lord, I pray that you will take us at whatever stage we're at and you'll start to work your marvelous work in us in the name of Jesus.